You know, the funny thing about being in the military that I discovered is that it's a lot like Hotel California, in that once you get there, once you check in, you can't check out. And that was a very interesting lesson for me to learn, because if you look at my entire experience, it was once again an experience where I just didn't fit in. Perhaps in part because I didn't have the interest, but most definitely because I didn't have the attention for it. I left Shepherd Air Force Base in, I believe, March of 1989. I stopped home, I got my car, I picked up my girlfriend, I don't know why I did that, and I headed for Rome, New York to Griffiths Air Force Base, where I'd been assigned to the 316th Bomber Wing, Strategic Air Force Base at that. And, you know, if you categorized the general behavior of mine while I was there, I was late for work a number of times. I wasn't in the habit of shaving because I didn't need to, and I didn't finish my training on time. And when I did finish my training and went and took the test, I failed the test. So you can imagine that when I tell you a couple more stories, you'll imagine very quickly, you can see that me and the Air Force maybe weren't a really good mix. And I know you go, Bob, didn't you say that you spent your whole life saying that you felt like you were supposed to go into the Air Force? Absolutely. And that's why when I say that God threw me out of B-52, I also truly deeply mean it when I say that it was an act of God that saved me. I'm going to tell just, a couple of quick stories. One in particular that I enjoyed was right after we got to the base, we were told that there was a lieutenant colonel coming in, or a colonel, something like that, who wanted to hear our impressions on training. And I remember they told us, it was a senior master sergeant or staff sergeant or some shit like that. And he comes and he says, so you got this guy coming in, you're going to be the only ones there, and I want you to have something to tell them about how they can improve tech school. Okay. And so when it got my turn and they said, what can we do to improve it? I said, well, you guys threaten airmen with Article 15s for not cleaning their room. And honestly, it seems a bit excessive and distracting to someone who's trying to focus on their homework and their studies. Come to find out much later that was the wrong comment to make. That did not make, God, I want to say the guy's name was Red, who was in charge of the wing. Did not make Red happy, not in the least. But you have to put that on the back as one of the first things I did. That summer, they sent me up on the plane to fill a demineralized water tank, which is really just pumping water into a tank. You pop the cover open, you take the cap, and you just fill it with demineralized water. The thing about military work when you're doing maintenance is that step one in all maintenance is open the manual. And because they got to the plane with the truck and me and said, hey, Bob, go fill the demineralized water, the stand was already there and in place. I jumped out, grabbed the hose, ran up top, opened it up, stuck the hose in, started pumping, and there's a drain valve right below, and all the water started coming out. And had I pulled out the book and read step one, it said, go in the cockpit and make sure that the drain valve's closed. So, of course, everybody knows what's going on because there's water all over the tarmac. And Bob clearly didn't pull out the book. I learned my lesson. It wasn't long after that, I then had my quality assurance QA test. I think it was a tech sergeant came out. And the assignment was hook up power to the plane. Hey, grabbed the book, pulled it out, read the instructions, went over to the power pack they sent out for me, and picked up the cord, started walking over, and the tech sergeant stopped me. And he opens up the power thing to the little maintenance sheet that's inside. And it turns out that they had delivered me a defective power unit. And so I was about to hook up power to a plane with a unit that wasn't operational. I don't know. So I failed my QA test. And probably the best one of all the stories was when I was working on midnights. They worked me, I was on 11 to 7 for a while. middle of winter, you get a boxed dinner. And so in the middle of winter, in the middle of the night, I had my boxed dinner, and then they said, hey, Burke, we're going to send you up into the plane. You need to fuel it, which is basically opening up knobs, and you fill it till you hit enough pounds in the tanks. 40,000 in this tank and 20,000. You get a map, and you just open and close knobs, and valves open and close, and they fill up. And the plane that night, in the middle of winter, had a heater going outside into it, and it was warm. I'd just eaten. I fell asleep. And so there's a guy who's always out front doing what they call fire duty. And he's on headphones, and he squawks me, Bob, how are we doing? To which I woke up and discovered that we had 10,000 pounds too much fuel on the plane. And you can put 200 to 300 pounds in this tank or in that tank, and there's like 11 or 12 tanks on the plane. But we weren't going to hide 10,000 pounds of fuel. And the pump that the guy came out with couldn't reverse the flow. They had to bring a different pump out, which once again meant everybody on the base heard exactly about what was going on. And the base, everybody on the flight line certainly knew that Burke had fallen asleep and overfueled the plane. When you add all of this together, it's not hard to understand why I think in October or September I received an Article 15 and did 30 days in non-judicial punishment. I was not a good airman. And when I say God threw me at an airplane, He threw me at a B-52, I was meant to frustrate that wing. If we were to be ready to turn the planet to glass, I was not your guy. But I did have a very important experience while I was there, in that we had an alert pad with 6 B-52s, each loaded with, I believe it was 16 thermonuclear intercontinental ballistic missiles that the planes could, fire at anybody. And every once in a while, they would do an alert test. And that meant that somewhere in the morning, the alarm was going to go off as if we were about to launch, or we were going to a high state of ready. And they sent a group of us to go up, and we were always supposed to assist the crew chiefs on the alert pad in, whatever they're supposed to do. In this case, we went to the dorm up there, where people go and spend 3, 4, 5 days at a time. We went up into the dorm, and we stood there and just kind of waited for our instructions to go back to the regular flight line. But I remember standing at the door to the dorm, which looked out directly onto the B-52s loaded with nuclear bombs. And I remember this. This isn't sour grapes. I remember very clearly looking at it and having a connection of what it exactly was that I was enrolled in, which was mass murder. And I did. I made a decision right then. I'm really not in for this. And if you wanted to take a job that was already difficult for me to do and lump that on top, my Air Force time was a mismatch, both in my interest and in my intellect. By the end of the first year, which would have been November, I went on leave because I needed a break after my incarceration. And I came back, and we went into the December months and January months, and the most incredible thing happened. George H.W. Bush, who had become the president, and the Soviet Union, who had collapsed, had forced, if you will, the military to cut back. And I want to say it was in January of 1989, there was an order put out by the president that they were going to let out between 7,000 and 8,000 individuals from each of the different branches of the military. And I remember Sergeant Cieslak, I think he was a tech sergeant, and he was a nice guy, but he did say to me one afternoon when this came out that I was leaving the Air Force. At that point, the only question was how. And by an act of God, I was let out on the Bush cutbacks. And so I got in on the Reagan build-up to beat the Soviet Union. to ostensibly kill a commie for mommy. And apparently within 18 months of my entering the military, there were no more commies for me to kill. And out of all of the airmen in the 316th, I think of the bomber wing, I was the only one that was let go. Yeah, me. On my last day, I came in, and I remember I was on the truck riding around, and Airman Gerhardt showed up, getting on the plane, on the truck, and he pulls out and he goes, "What are we doing with this?" And he had a bottle, I think a bottle of ketchup. I thought, well, are we doing a potluck for me? That would be awful nice. And then near the end of the shift, it wasn't a potluck that we were having, not in the least. One of the things that they do for airmen is there's a light on the inside of the truck. And it's an initiation if they pick you up one day and you fuck the light. And so at the end of my shift, having not been initiated, they picked me up and I fucked the light. And that was very sweet. And then, having harnessed me into their well, they carried me into the hangar where a chair was waiting, and then they taped me down with duct tape and pulled out condiments. Not condoms, condiments. Ketchup, mustard, Miracle Whip, relish, barbecue sauce. I'm not even sure what else there was. And they covered me, head to toe. I'm different. I didn't fit in, as I find I don't fit in most places. C-Slack eventually cut me loose after everybody had gone home, and he was actually kind enough to give me a ride once I was able to clean up some. And that was how my Air Force duty at the 316th Bomber Wing ended. I don't know how else to put it, but to say that my release was truly an act of God. I was meant to go in the military. I was meant to have the experiences that I had, and I was meant to leave in the manner that I left. And it does. It seems odd to say so. But I'm grateful for the experience. I had lots of great other experiences. I got to skeech in the snow behind the tow vehicle. That was fun. Going out and climbing on the wings of planes and stuffing parachutes into the back and all that good stuff. There's a great story. There's a great joke about crew chiefs. I was a crew chief. Apparently crew chiefs have the second highest rate of alcoholism, which is about right. There's a joke about crew chiefs. And it goes like this: an Army general, a Marine general, a Navy admiral, and an Air Force general are in a bar getting drunk, and the Army general says, "My guys are tougher than shit." He takes them over to the base, and he says, "I'll show you how tough they are." And he takes a grenade, and he pulls it, and he says, "Private, grenade!" Private says, "Sir, private ticket report, sir." "Yes, sir." Jumps on the grenade, blows him off the chest, says, "Oh, that's tough." The Marine general says, "I got tough." Goes over to the Marine base with all the other guys. He finds an airman. He finds a private, and he says, "Private, sir, private, sir." He says, "You see that tank? Jump in front of the tank." "Sir, yes, sir." Jumps in front of the tank. Says, "Well, that's tough." The Navy admiral says, "You guys ain't seen nothing." He's come over to my base. They go over there, and they go over to the Navy base, and seaman up there, and he's scraping the paint off the side of the battle crew, off the aircraft carrier. The admiral says, "Seaman, sir, seaman ticket report, sir." "Yes, sir." He says, "Jump into those sharks." "Sir, yes, sir." Jumps into the sharks. The admiral says, "That's tough." Air Force general says, "Hang on." Takes him over to the Air Force base, takes him out onto the flight line. There's a crew chief on a B-2 stand about 60, 70 feet up in the air, changing the very top back tail light on the B-52, and the general says, "Airman, sir, Airman Burke, report, sir." "Yes, sir." He says, "Airman, jump off that stand." "Fuck you," general says. Now that's tough. So crew chiefs. Anyway, to all the guys that I was in the Air Force with at Griffiths Air Force Base, thank you very much for the experiences. And thank you very much for the honor of fucking light. And I know, as difficult as I was to get along, that probably I deserve to have a little condiment for the last day. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this little story. Next week, I'm going to tell you about the other military that I joined, and that one is the Libertarian Special Forces and the NOLA job. We're going to jump way forward to 2018 on that one. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share if you feel it, and I hope 2022 brings you lots of peace and quiet. Peace.